All right, here they come. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our workshop entitled What You Need to Know About Estate Planning. We are so happy that you've decided to join us today, and we can't wait to provide you with exclusive information and resources that will give you a deeper understanding of us and our services here. My name is Emily, and I'm the Marketing Director for Clinkscales Elder Law Practice. We have our main office here in Hayes, which we actually just moved to a new office at 1407 Main Street. So we're very excited to host our first webinar at our new office here today. And then we have our other office in Wichita, and we serve clients and families throughout the entire state of Kansas. I would like to invite you all to type any questions that you may have in the chat box that's located at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. And then at the end of the workshop, we will address any of those questions or concerns that you may have. So now, without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to our attorney and president, Randy Clinkscales, to get us started.
Well, welcome everybody. And Emily, I'm so glad that was your phone and not mine that went off. Today, we're in a new office with a brand new workshop about what you need to know about estate planning. Before we get going, I'd like to make sure you can see the slides okay and you can hear okay. If you would, there's a chat, type Y for yes if you can, N for no if you cannot, if you're having trouble. Let me just wait just a moment and see what the poll shows us.
We're already getting lots of Y's, Randy, so you're good to proceed.
Okay, all right. So just a little bit of background here. Really got this idea from families that have estate plans and really don't know what they are, don't understand them. Maybe they didn't have a lot of communication with the person that prepared the estate plan. Maybe they were concerned they weren't listened to. Maybe they tried to do it online themselves, or maybe they don't have one. And so that really was the genesis of this topic. And so today, you're going to discover how to avoid the government controlling your property, your decisions, and your affairs. We're going to talk about how to avoid the biggest estate planning mistakes, how to choose agents that will follow your wishes, how to pay for care, and how to give yourself the best chance to stay at home. And again, these are really common focuses of clients that come in to see me. And this is for you if you do not have an estate plan, or if you have an estate plan that's out of date. If you're not sure, let me pause for a moment. 60+% of people do not have an estate plan. Of the 30 or 40% that do, most of them are out of date or not understanding by the client. And so it kind of gets in the second, this is for you if you're not sure what your estate plan does or how it works or whether it will even work. It's for you if you're wanting to preserve and protect your property and income for your spouse and your family. If you're wanting to pass on or protect a business, if you're concerned about paying for long-term care, and you're wanting to be sure that your wishes are followed. When I meet with our clients, one thing I always like to ask them is, imagine if you could wave a magic wand, what would you want? Stay at home as you age, have a plan that ensures and empowers someone to carry out your wishes, have a plan that you understand and know will work, to know how to pay for care, or it may just be have peace of mind that you won't lose everything to long-term care cost and that your legacy goals are protected. One of my favorite clients is named Tad, and represented Tad for a long time. And he wrote me this nice note after his wife had passed away. When my wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I tried to care for her myself. My son, a doctor, told me I had to get help or we would end up with 2 sick people. My banker recommended Clinkscales. Clinkscales helped me care for myself and my wife. They helped me monitor my care and my wife's care. If I ever had a question, I just had to pick up the phone. And he concluded by saying, I never could have done this without you. Who is my office? Who is Clinkscales Dental Law Practice? We have 3 lawyers, all partners, myself, Jenny Walters, and Adam Deese. Our focus is on helping families preserve and protect their dignity, health, finances, and legacy. We're considered an elder care firm. Our practice is throughout Kansas with offices in Hays and Wichita. And I've been practicing in Hays since 1983. And who am I? Again, I'm an elder care attorney, focusing on people with aging and chronic care issues, protection of assets from long-term care costs. Been practicing for over 40 years. As I said, since 83 in Hays. The last 18 years have been the best when I refocused my practice from a general estate planning lawyer to one focused on the chronic care issues and aging issues. And I write quite a bit. I've written a couple books or co-authored a couple books and some newsletters. Remember some organizations that are important to me, the National Alliance of Attorneys for Alzheimer's Planning. I got to serve on the Governor Kelly's Alzheimer's Disease Task Force, which was really important to me. I just wanted them to have the feel from, I was the only elder law attorney on the task force, and I thought they really needed to know what was going on from the law side. This is my family, and this has no relevance to anything other than they're important to me. It's my wife, my 3 sons, and my daughter-in-law and my 2 grandsons. Why am I so passionate? Because I think this is important for you to understand. So again, I had a general practice of law. My grandmother got sick, and then my mom died. So I took over my grandmother's care, and I took care of her for 10 years. And I learned a lot from her. I was very fortunate that my grandmother was always cognitive. And so I got a lot of feedback from her about what she wanted. And the number one thing was she wanted to be independent. And she wanted to stay out of the nursing home. She wanted to protect her resources so that she could maintain the lifestyle that she wanted. And I learned that as a caregiver for my grandmother, I needed assistance. I learned that I needed to have a plan, but I needed to be flexible about that plan based on the changing laws, the changing desires of my grandmother, the changing health of my grandmother. And the journey was really wonderful. And our office practice model is really designed around my journey with my grandmother. In fact, we have a photograph of my grandmother and my grandfather both in my office, just to remind us about where we came from. Got this recently. My dad would have lost everything financially had it not been for Randy and his team using their expertise to divert what Randy termed the approaching train wreck. What Randy did for our family was create a life care plan for my mom with a goal of keeping her safe and protecting as many of their assets as he could. We used their social services expertise, legal services, and all the other services that came with his plan. It was an investment that my dad and my sisters and I shared. Had we not done it, I am convinced my father would not have his house and the small farm he grew up on. The plan paid for itself 100 times over. If you're an individual wondering how you will one day respectfully care for your aging parents, consider checking into this law firm. And I really liked her languaging about respectfully caring for your loved one. So you need a plan to adequately and effectively take care of yourself, your spouse, and your family. So today you're going to discover ways to avoid government control of your property, your decisions, your affairs, and even you. You're going to discover how to avoid the biggest estate planning mistakes. You're going to discover how to pick good agents that will follow your wishes and how to pay for care and ways to stay at home. So let's start with our first one, how to keep the government from controlling your property, your decision, your affairs, and you. And I think this is always a surprise to a lot of people. Kansas is one of 4 states that is this way. In Kansas, without a plan, no one has the automatic right to help you or follow your wishes. Without a plan, the government and courts would make decisions for you. You, on the other hand, can determine who has what authority and how that authority is to be followed. There are documents that you need, and they're not form documents. So I want to give you a good example. Mrs. Wright, this was just a few years back. She and Mr. Wright attended a workshop. They had no estate plan and no powers of attorneys. They were a farming family. Some of the farm was set up in joint tenancy between the two of them. Some of it was just in Mr. Wright's name. Lots of the farm equipment and livestock really wasn't in either name. They visited our office and then they went home to think about it. Mr. Wright had a stroke. He loses capacity and eventually dies. Mrs. Wright had no power of attorney to get affairs in order prior to his death. So there was a period there where Mr. Wright lived but had no capacity. The result was that after he passed away, the joint property, so some of the farm ground, went to Mrs. Wright. But the other farm ground, the equipment and the livestock had to go through probate. Under intestate law, half that property went to Mrs. Wright and the other half to the children. A lot of family difficulties developed. We were able to talk the kids into transferring the property back to Mrs. Wright, but there were some tax consequences and some hurt feelings. We worked with Mrs. Wright after all of this was cleared up, and we set up an irrevocable trust to protect her land. And inside that trust, it said who the land went to. We set up powers of attorneys with one of the children that she felt like she could trust. Later, she was involved in a car accident and got sued, but the land of the irrevocable trust was protected from lawsuits, and so they could not get to the land, and so her wishes were protected. Another comment from her, we should have done something when we came in. Our delay cost us over $40,000 and created a lot of stress for me and my children. And frankly, I think the stress was more painful than the $40,000. So I want to point out some things here. If you're incapacitated, under Kansas law, no one has a right to act for you. Not your spouse, not your children. And so if you don't have a power of attorney for health care, the court's going to appoint a guardian. If you don't have a financial power of attorney, it's going to appoint a conservator. And until that is done, no one can act for you. That's going to be paid for by your resources. And you also have to post a bond. Those guardianship and conservatorships are generally much more restrictive than a financial and healthcare power of attorney. In addition, if you die without a will or a trust, there's going to be intestate proceedings. And the law is going to dictate where your property goes. Your spouse could end up losing half the property. There could be court proceedings for conservatorship for minor children or adult disabled persons. There could be a guardianship for minor children if there's no surviving parents. And again, this is going to all be paid for by your estate. So what are the essential documents? And I could talk all day on each one of them, but a financial power of attorney, again, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. A healthcare power of attorney that reflects your wishes about what kind of care that you want, a living will, which is like, we call it a declaration in Kansas that if you're terminally ill, that you don't want additional services. And then a decision about a will or a trust. And again, we could talk all day about that. I generally prefer a trust just because the administration of it is so much more simple and we don't have to go to court. A will, on the other hand, to be effective, you have to die and you have to go to court. On the financial power of attorney, I think this is important. You have to have an agent in there. You need someone you can trust, and you need somebody that is a good backup. You can name a guardian and conservator, and you can determine how much power that agent has. In Kansas, I want to give you this important tidbit. There are 15 powers that, unless you specifically mention them, they're not included in a financial power of attorney. They're not good powers or bad powers. They're powers. And so it's something that I like to discuss with my client. Generally, the older my clients, the broader the power of attorney, but that's not always true. And again, the younger my clients, maybe the more narrow the power of attorney. So again, let's kind of go back to what we're talking about. We're talking about how to keep the government from controlling your property, your decision, your affairs, and you. And so the point here is you decide, or the government's going to decide for you. So what do you need to do? Schedule a strategy session with our office as soon as possible. Act before capacity is an issue. Express your goals in your legal documents. Empower your agents and caregivers to carry out your goals, and be sure that they understand them and that you've talked with them about it, and that they're up to this task. And don't give up, there are solutions. Let's go to the next one. What is an effective estate plan? Well, I hear some funny stories. I hear stuff like, I'm going to leave everything to my son, Josh, and then he'll take care of everybody. That's what I call a pretty crappy estate plan. So an estate plan, to be effective, needs to be in writing, not generic. It needs to be unique to your goals, your family, and your situation. So as an example, I had a family where they named one of their kids as the trustee of their trust. Years later, I discovered that he really wasn't up to it and didn't want to do it. He was the least aggressive person in the family. Maybe he did okay, but I had to do a lot of hand-holding with him. So go back to our question, wasn't an effective estate plan? It reduces or eliminates taxes. There are a lot of things going on with taxes and have been for the last 3 years. And there's going to be some major changes happening in 2025. Again, to be an effective estate plan, you need trustees and executors and agents that are equipped with knowledge, instructions, and ability to follow your wishes and goals to avoid court and fighting. And then your assets and your property need to be funded through your plan. And so that last one, assets and property funded through your plan, that is a huge estate planning mistake. That would probably be number 3 on my list. My number 1 would be not having an estate plan. My number 2 would be having a generic estate plan that you really don't know what it does, and it doesn't address the contingencies. It doesn't address contingencies. But number 3 is property not being funded correctly through your plan. And I'll kind of get into that in just a moment. So the Jacksons came to us a while back. Mr. Jackson's still working. Mrs. Jackson's retired. They really hadn't done any type of planning other than they had done some pay on death beneficiaries, transfer on death beneficiaries, that sort of thing. They had set up pay on death beneficiaries to their 4 children. They did not have powers of attorneys. They had 4 children. Unfortunately, one, Mark, had passed away and had left a special needs child. One son, Bud, actually was running their business and was wanting to take it over, and he had a couple of children. A daughter, Debbie, was going through a divorce and has a child. A daughter, Barbara, has had some issues with drug abuse. She is divorced, and her ex-husband has the custody of the children, and she's paying support. The Jacksons didn't really know where to start. They knew that there were issues that they needed to address. They wanted the business to stay in the family, but they wanted to be fair to the children, and they wanted something to go to the grandchildren. So if they did nothing, what would happen with no powers of attorneys? No one had the power to act, and so if one of them lost capacity, we would have to go to court. If they died, probate would be necessary. If they died, the property would be divided into fourths, and the business could end up being lost. The property could be lost to the divorce, could be divided by the divorce court. We'd have to deal with Barb's drug issues. The disabled child of Mark would be disqualified from Medicaid. If investments went to any of the children, they would have to go through a conservatorship. So we did a lot for the Jacksons. We set up really good powers of attorneys with really good agents and added 15 really strong dynamic powers. And we worked with the agents on what their wishes were. We set forth their healthcare desires and put it in their powers of attorneys. We set up the revocable trust to manage and avoid probate, to protect the business for Bud, and expressed why, so we could avoid litigation. In that trust, we protected Debbie's inheritance from divorce. We set up a special needs trust for Mark's child. We also protected Barb's inheritance from her drug problems so that something can go to her children and not to their father. And real important, we corrected all the beneficiary designations so everything flowed through that plan that where we wanted to get everything protected and to the right source. And I like this. Thanks so much for your help. We didn't know what we didn't know. This is a good tax one. The Augustines wanted to transition their farm to their children. And so originally they came in and wanted me to prepare deeds to their kids. The issue really, there are multiple issues here. The planning concern that I have was that if they sell it to the kids, I guess that was the original idea, they were going to sell it. They would have to pay a whole bunch of capital gains taxes. And then the kids would also have to pay taxes if they wanted to buy each other out. They were concerned about losing control, or I was concerned about them losing control. Because of the capital gains taxes, their Medicare premiums were going to go way up. Because of the jump in income, they would get hit with another tax called a surtax of 3.8%. And then I was also concerned about estate taxes. And in 2025, the estate taxes are going to go up. What I mean by that, right now, you don't have to pay estate taxes if you don't have more than $12 million in property. In 2025, if nothing is done, that law sunsets and it goes down to $5 million. So that's a real issue that would affect the Augustines. So what we did in the Augustines case is we placed the land into an irrevocable trust. We went ahead and gave the income to the children. The children will get a step up in basis in the property. We retain the right to change the beneficiaries in the Augustines. So if something happens to one of the kids, if we need to bypass a kid or whatever, they can still do that. There are no tax consequences. There are no surtax or increased Medicare premiums, which could range from $170 to $578 a month. And the other thing that we put in there is we addressed something called portability. And so we put in there that the federal tax exemption could be ported from Mr. Augustine to Mrs. Augustine or vice versa. And the effect of that is it gives us a lot more flexibility to have an estate that's not taxable. Then here's another family. This is really a funding case. So the Jones family went to a trust seminar. It's kind of one of these seminars that they have, and it's about sign up for a trust, and maybe you talk with somebody on the phone, whatever. And so they did a standard trust, standard powers of attorneys, didn't really have a discussion with an attorney. Unfortunately, they have a daughter with special needs. They have 2 children under 18 and 1 adult child. They have assets of a home, a checking account, and investments that are held in joint tenancy with each other. They have 1 investment account of $200,000 that they, for whatever reason, held jointly with their adult daughter, with the idea that if they died, she would have money to pay bills. And then they have some IRAs, which they name each other. The problem with their plan is that nothing goes through the estate plan. Everything will go through intestate succession, except the joint account that goes to the adult daughter. So our solution was to fund everything through the trust, creating a tax savings for the estate. And what we did there is a lot of the IRA we gave to the disabled daughter, because the disabled daughter can stretch it out over her lifetime, thus reducing the tax impact of the IRAs. We avoided the conservatorship for the minors, and we put the investment account back in the estate so it could be distributed according to the Joneses' wishes. And again, their goal was they really just wanted to protect each other and then stuff to go to their kids. I want to read this one to you. Clinkscales successfully delivered on their promise to organize my trust agreement and organize all of our medical documents. Then put them in all one binder that included funeral arrangements. What a wonderful stress relief for me and my family. Kayla is a care coordinator with our office, has been immensely supportive while navigating the mysteries of obtaining quality home health care for my wife. This support is priceless to me. Qualifying for all the home care has enabled us to stay in our home while still providing care services to my wife. Thanks to the entire Clinkscales team. So what do you need to do? Schedule a strategy session as soon as possible. Explore and establish your goals, address your concerns, and address the hard questions. Get in place strong powers of attorneys and other estate planning documents. Feel comfortable with your agents. Be sure that your plan is going to be followed. It's no longer about dying, but also about what if you get sick and someone has to act for you. Now we're going to talk about how to pay for care. And probably this is the number one reason people call my office. And usually they're in a crisis. But you can make the decision on how to pay for care. You don't have to go broke if you need long-term care. You're going to learn today that you can use government benefits to pay for care, such as Medicare, VA, and Medicaid. So let's take a case where we're using planned resources. And so just a little bit of background, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson are both in their 70s, so they're past age 65. So they're both on Medicare. They had purchased some long-term care insurance of $200 a day for 3 years. They also had supplemental insurance. They were going to, Mr. Johnson, let me back up. Mr. Johnson had a stroke, which resulted in some dementia and is in the hospital. They wanted to discharge him. They're from a small community. And Mrs. Johnson was going to transition him to a nursing home in that community. That nursing home was not a skilled facility. Why is that important? Because Medicare would pay for him going to a skilled facility, number one. Number two, by going to a skilled facility, he would get skilled care. And that means that he would get better. So we found a skilled facility and transitioned Mr. Johnson to that skilled facility so that Medicare would pay and he would get better. We worked with the long-term care policy to make some home care and home improvements. As a result, he got into the skilled facility that was paid for by Medicare. He got well enough to go home, though with some assistance, and the assistance was paid for by the long-term care policy. So the early involvement did four things. It got Medicare benefits extended. It got the health improvement Mr. Johnson needed. And Mr. Johnson was able to return home. And the long-term policy was extended, protecting assets. And the reason it was extended is we were not using the full $200 a day. And so the policy got longer and longer. And just to let you know, Mr. Johnson's still at home and he's not using his long-term care policy and getting around fairly well. Then this one is Mr. and Mrs. Schmidt. This is a different approach. They had some long-term care insurance they had just purchased. It was for 3 or 4 years. It only paid $3,200 a month. They were very unhappy with it. It was fairly expensive. They both had IRAs. They were concerned that everything would be depleted, that the long-term care would run out, that it was not enough to cover the average cost. Long-term care insurance long-term care cost at that time was about $6,000. It's about another $1,000, $2,000 higher now. But what we did is we found a special type of hybrid life insurance policy for them. And I don't sell life insurance, okay? But we contacted the right people to find this hybrid life insurance policy for them that has a long-term care rider. It was a one-time premium. We took $150,000 out of their IRA and we bought a $250,000 life insurance policy. It pays $7,000 a month for long-term care. If they have a long-term care claim, it reduces the death benefit. But then when they die, whatever's left over goes to their family. And there's no annual premium. And this is kind of a funny one because actually their children are the ones that made the appointment. And they were really happy that they did. And then we're going to take another one where the Lundgrens, Mr. Lundgren had an early diagnosis of dementia, but he's still a very active farmer. He's just in his 60s. His comment to me was, I want to stay in control, but I want to be sure my wife and my land are protected. So he was really concerned about his wife and his children and his land. So we set up broad powers of attorneys. We put the land into an irrevocable trust. We added his care instructions to his health care power of attorney and met with his agents so they know his wishes. And the result was that though it may be several years before he ever needs assistance, his goals are guaranteed through his plan set forth in his documents. His land's protected. He remains in control. His wife has power to further protect resources in the event he does need long-term care. And his health care goals are protected, taking pressure and guilt off his family. And finally, I want to talk about, we're talking about how to pay for care using Medicaid. This is a family, Mrs. Goforth has Lewy bodies. That's a very devastating type of dementia. She's been discharged to the nursing home from the hospital, paying $8,000 a month. The assets included Mr. Goforth's retirement of $300,000, a joint account of $60,000. Mr. Goforth has Social Security of $1,500 a month, and hers is $800 a month. Boy, there's just a lot of misinformation out there on the internet and coffee shops and so forth. In this particular case, Mr. Goforth was told he would need to spend down all of his resources before Medicaid would help. He would need to use all of his income to pay for her care, and Medicaid would put a lien on his home. Mr. Goforth was worried his wife would not get good care if she went on Medicaid. So using some of our Medicaid tools and legal documents, we restructured their assets. We were able to qualify Mrs. Goforth for Medicaid. Mr. Goforth was able to keep all the assets and his income, and Mrs. Goforth's income to support himself. So the result, and again, let me just really emphasize this. Mr. Goforth was not forced to go broke. He has enough income to take care of himself, even though Mrs. Goforth is on Medicaid. There's no lien on his home, and he can sell it without losing it to Medicaid. He kept all of his retirement. Our office monitors his wife's care and is continued to advocate for her, giving peace of mind to Mr. Goforth. What I want to touch on here also is sometimes in these situations, if Mr. and Mrs. Goforth was a wartime veteran, there would be a VA pension that could be available to help pay for some of these costs. And it could be up to $2,300 a month tax-free. I want to read this one to you. My dad would have lost everything financially had it not been for Randy and his team using their expertise to divert what Randy termed the approaching train wreck. What Randy did for our family was create a life care plan for my mom with a goal of keeping her safe and protecting as many of their assets as he could. We used our social services expertise, legal services, and all the other services that came with the plan. This was an investment that my dad and my sisters and I shared. Had we not done it, I'm convinced my father would not have his house and the small farm he grew up on. The plan paid for itself 100 times over. If you're an individual wondering how you will pay for care, how you will one day respectfully care for your aging parents, consider checking into this firm. So what do you need to do if you're trying to pay for care or wondering how to pay for care? Schedule a strategy session as soon as possible. Explore all funding resources. Get in place strong powers of attorneys and other estate planning documents. And the goal is to find, get, and pay for good care without going broke. And finally, I want to talk to you about how to stay at home. And I think, when I go back to my grandmother, I think that was what really was important to her. And it's not the home versus the nursing home. There are options. So I want to share my grandmother with you. Her saying was, honey, someday I know I'll have to go to the nursing home. I just don't want to know about it. When I took over her care, she was 86. She lived 560 miles from me. I kept trying to get her to move up here to Kansas from Texas. But her goal was she wanted to stay independent and alone. So we found resources in the community. and she was able to stay in her residence for 6 years. After 6 years, we moved her to assisted living in Kansas. She was able to stay there for 4 years until she was 96. And we were able to advocate for her and keep her safe there. She spent 50 days in the nursing home, dying at age 96. The lessons from my grandmother was, with proper guidance, you can stay at home longer. The transition can be gradual. Support for the caregiver is critical, and resources can be stretched to achieve goals. And then I want to share this one. Lane and Lisa came to us 5 years ago. They're both in their 70s. Lisa has MS. Lane has scoliosis. That's a back issue. Their children live in other states and have their own families and are just too busy to help. Lisa had just transitioned to electric wheelchair. And these are two professional people. Lane's comment was, I want to take care of my wife, and that was my promise. But Lane realized that he would be unable to lift Lisa much longer. They had tried to find in-home help, didn't really know what they were doing, and had been through several different people. Their problem was that both were concerned that Lisa may need to transition to a nursing home, really for the sake of Lane. The financial resources were not an issue. However, both of them were overwhelmed. Our office helped find reputable caregivers. The first barrier was to convince Lane and Lisa to accept help. That was a barrier with my grandmother. We continued to monitor the help that they got. We got Lane into therapy. We created time off and days off for Lane. We directed them on how to modify their home and their lives for accessibility issues. The result is that Lisa is still at home, though the MS has progressed. Lane's back has continued to deteriorate. However, both are at peace. We have an ever-evolving plan to keep them at home. This is a family that we worked with for quite a while. Sherry was younger than her husband, but she was dedicated to him. She said, my husband had Parkinson's. You helped me keep him at home as long as possible. You showed me how to be a better caregiver. I could not have figured out how to pay for care with Medicare and Medicaid on my own. So if you're trying to stay at home, what do you need to do? If facing aging or chronic issues, meet with us for a strategy session. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the greater the crisis and the more limited the options. Don't give up. There are solutions. My father, Henry, and I met with this firm and decided to hire them. Best decisions of our life. They had great knowledge and helped us apply for funds that we had no clue were available. They are there anytime you need them and return calls quick and with answers. Over the years, I even became friends with a few of the staff. Great team to work with. I think this is one of my favorite. Pat came to us in a very difficult situation, very bitter about the cards that have been dealt her, but we were able to guide her through the process, and she became a great friend with our office. My husband needed nursing home care. You guided me through the process. Your care coordinators made sure my husband was getting good care. I highly recommend you because you're always there for your clients and will guide them through everything that goes on, things we never expected to go through. And I think that's part of the key. Is a lot of times we're ahead of the game because we know what is going to happen next, and so we can get a jump on that plan. So far you've discovered there are ways to stay at home longer, but you need guidance. There are certain documents that empower others to act for you and to protect and preserve your wishes, whether it be health, financial, or legacy. Planning allows you to pay for care without losing everything, without putting your financial burden on, and without putting a financial burden on children or other members. So I hope you get this one thing. For most of us, at some point, someone will be trying to carry out our wishes. Let me say it again. For most of us, at some point, someone will be trying to carry out our wishes. That may be at our death, that may be because of incapacity, but someone's going to be trying to carry out our wishes. With proper guidance of an expert, you can plan, direct, and control. How do you make that happen? You have a short phone call with our office to be sure that we can help you. So if you're calling us about a divorce, we're not the right firm. And if we can, then if we feel like we're the right fit for you, we'll schedule a 30 to 60 minute, maybe longer, meeting in person or by Zoom or telephone with me or one of our other two attorneys. There, we'll discuss your financial and legal needs. We'll review your current estate plan. We'll help establish some long-term goals. And we'll answer all the questions that you have about your unique situation. And everybody's situation is unique. At the end of our time together, you'll have an analysis of your current plan. You'll have better clarity of your issues and your goals and a blueprint on how to achieve the goals. And we'll give you an exact amount of the investment to achieve the goals. After our meeting, you'll decide to get started. We'll draft a summary of your plan and we will prepare the necessary legal documents that will be the framework of your plan to be signed by you at another meeting. We'll meet again to sign the documents and begin the process of putting your plan into place. And again, this is not just about the documents, it's about the solutions. We will then work together on other tools and steps such as titling a property and the like. If dealing with a chronic illness or aging issues that require assistance, we may want you to meet with one of our care coordinators to get to that person's input and answer your care questions. Our strategy sessions generally run $650, but because you attended today, that's free. Sounds good, too good to be true. What's the catch? Our triager intake person, Macy, has scheduled 6 spots during the next 4 weeks. So if you want to schedule the strategy session, call her, call 877-325-8040, and we'll talk with you. Emily is going to also send you a SurveyMonkey link that you can click on that will, again, get you a phone call. But here's my personal guarantee that after that meeting, you're going to know more than you did before today. You will have an analysis of what happens if you do nothing. You will realize there are options available to guide and protect you and your family. And that's what's most important. And your time's not going to be wasted. So again, call the number 877-325-8040 or click on the SurveyMonkey link. And if you do, then you're going to get our free book, What You Really Need to Know for the Second Half of Life. And you're going to get a written summary of our recommendations. So again, call the number 877-325-8040. And you'll get the free strategy session, an analysis of your current plan, a free written report to achieve your goals, and the free book, What You Really Need to Know, What You Really Need to Know for the Second Half of Life. So Emily, I am going to turn it over to you to see if there's any questions. I know I've kind of pushed it up on the hour. I'm sorry about that.
We do have a few questions, but please, if anyone else has questions, put them in the chat box now so we can get to them. They just want to know, can we come to your office if we've already worked with a different lawyer in the past?
Of course, yeah, that's not a problem. We would like for you to bring your old estate plan. But yeah, that's not unusual for us to meet with somebody that has used somebody else in the past.
And another question, when is the best time to plan?
Yesterday. I mean, that's a good question. When my kids turned 18, I went ahead and had them do financial and healthcare powers of attorneys. And those are really important to me because if something were to happen to them, car accident or whatever, our hands would be tied. Their parent, my wife and I, our hands would be tied without the proper documents. So I always think it's important to get some kind of plan in place. But then I think it's equally as important is every few years to review that plan in light of changing laws is certainly part of it, but also in light of your changing family situation, changing dynamics in your relationships, changing occupations, changing properties. All of that would I always want my clients to review their estate plan every 2 or 3 years.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for addressing those questions. It looks like we don't have any additional questions in the chat box at this moment, but please do feel free to add your question now as we go ahead and wrap up our presentation for this afternoon. I do just want to kindly remind everyone that you will receive that follow-up email that Randy mentioned that will contain the important things. So that email will include a recording of the session, and we provide that to you so you can share it with other family members, friends, or colleagues that weren't able to make it today, or so you can just go back through and take notes on all of the important topics that Randy covered. And then the other thing that email contains is the SurveyMonkey link. And I did put that link already in the chat box for you to complete. And if you fill out that quick 2-minute survey, you will receive the completely free strategy session where you will speak with one of our attorneys about your unique situation. And I do want to just reiterate that you can call our office anytime at the 877 number on your screen now. If you have questions regarding the free strategy session or have any other questions, we're always happy to chat with you. I'd also invite you to stay up to date on our upcoming events on our website, since we usually have monthly workshops where we go over different topics. And I'm going to go ahead and do one last call here for questions before we close up. And okay, here we go. So where are the strategy sessions scheduled? So Randy, do you want to talk about how you can do those strategy sessions with us?
Yeah, and so we can do those in our Hayes office. We can do those in our Wichita office. We do a lot of them by Zoom. And that's a lot of times a good way to get started is set up a Zoom meeting. We can do it by telephone, although I prefer to look at people. Whatever works for you, we'll work out one of the methods. So again, either in person in Hayes or Wichita, or by a Zoom meeting.
Perfect. Okay, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to call us, or you can email me at emily@clinkscaleslaw.com. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and close down for the day. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you so much for sharing that information, Randy.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everybody.